Welcome to Adobe AfterEffects. This is your After Effects screen. You've got your project files, which will be saved in here. This will be any files that are used in your actual project, regardless of what type of file they are and when they are applied. You've got your effect controls, which we'll come to later. You've got your composition screen, which is where you can see what you are doing in a visual representation, so you're not trying to fly blind. You've got your preview controls over here. This will give you a real-time effect or real-time video of what your effects will look like in your composition window. And at the bottom, you've got your layers palette and your timeline, which come as one particular set. So anything that goes onto a layer will also have a timeline associated to it. Now because this is a new document, I've gone File, New and New Project to start this up. And first place that I want to start is I want to grab some video footage, drag it across and add it in. You drag it into the project section and it will import the piece of footage. Now it will only import one piece of footage at a time with click and drag. You need to go to File, Import and Multiple Files if you want to import more than one piece of footage at a time. So we've got the piece of footage in. We still don't have anything up here because our timeline at the bottom here is still empty. So I'm now going to click and drag that, put it down there, and you'll notice that it has now come up as a composition in the files for the project. We don't do any manipulating now on this base movie layer. That is just going to sit there and play through when the movie's actually played or when the film is played. We need to work on a new layer, and for the case of adding a wand or flash effect, which is what this tutorial is looking at, we want to go to a new layer and we want a solid layer. That will come up with this dialog box. For a wand effect, you're probably going to want to be over here at white, so it's got a nice bright white core where the light is shooting out of the wand. I'm doing a fire effect, so I'm going to put some fire shooting up out of the goblet of fire over here. So I'm on a slightly more creamy yellowy colour. Click OK on the colour. You don't need to set anything in here, it will already be picked up from the import of your original footage. Click OK on there and that will give us a nice solid white screen. Not very useful in terms of actually viewing any kind of film, but it's a nice pretty colour, I suppose. Let's make this a bit more useful. Grab your pen tool from the toolbar at the top, and the pen tool in After Effects works exactly the same way as the pen tool in Illustrator and the pen tool in Photoshop for anyone who's used that. Click to set your first point, let go of the click. Move your mouse, click and drag to set your second point. I'm just doing some kind of fancy fire shape. Click back onto your first point to close the loop. You must close your path, otherwise it won't disappear. The background won't disappear and keep just that front bit. So now I've got the shape that I'm going to start with. It's not going to look like I've set it up here for very long. Don't really need to worry too much about that. And what I could do at this point, if I was going to do my effect from here, is line it up with the top of the goblet. I'm not going to do my effect right from the start though. I'm going to start my effect from about a second in, and as you can see the camera angle has actually changed slightly, So I'm going to line my little layer that I'm working on here up with the edge of the goblet at that point. Now at the moment that's just sitting there. Doesn't matter which bit of the footage you are actually on, it is still just sitting there. So what we need to actually do is go slightly before where we want our effect to start, and we want to expand our layer and our timeline. So to expand it, you click on the arrow key, the arrow will turn and point down over, and you can see we've got a masks option and a transform option. To start with, so that we can basically hide our mask from the start of our footage on this bit, is we want to go into the masks options, we want mask 1, and then we want to put the stopwatch on to set the tracking for keyframes. Keyframes are parts of the animation where the action actually changes. It tells the computer and the encoding of the file what needs to happen at that point for it to do calculations to get from that point to the next. So I've got a keyframe there. Keyframes are these little diamond shapes. There's a diamond shaped keyframe there. You set the keyframes by clicking on diamond shapes over here. I'm going to go forward to where I actually want my footage to start for my effect, and I'm going to click the little diamond to set a second keyframe. Because they're so close together, I'm going to use the arrow key to navigate back to my first keyframe, and on the first keyframe I'm going to drop the mask opacity down to 0, and you will notice that you now have the outline. The outline doesn't stay. The outline will not be on the final render. You now have the outline, but no fill. And when I go forward, it appears. So it's going to appear at that point. That's the first bit. That is now set up. You would reverse that effect by putting in a second keyframe, a third keyframe at 100%, a fourth keyframe just after it 0% to stop your effect if you didn't want it going off screen. I'm going to take this effect and it is going to go off screen, so I'm not going to worry about that. You're now finished with the masks, so you can collapse that masks options. So at the moment we have something that just appears and then sits there. Not quite what we're after. So I'm just going to move this down a little bit so that we can see the top. As I said, I'm going to take this from here up the top on there. Grab the arrow tool back, otherwise you can't use anything. And get the drop down in the transform section of this layer. This time we want to work with the position. We click the stopwatch to set a keyframe, so that is our start position. Go to where we want the position to end. Now this is going to be quite a quick one. I'm going to go to probably about there. That is not a long space of time, however long it looks on here. I'm going to set a keyframe at that point, and I'm just going to grab, not that bit, I'm going to grab I'm going to zoom in, I'm going to move this down, and then with my selection tool I'm going to grab and move this shape, and I can just nudge it up the top until the shape disappears. So that's now given me a straight line that this shape is going to follow between this keyframe and this keyframe, and you can see if I scrub it back you can see it follows it. So that's fine. I don't really want it going on particularly on a straight line. There's a couple of you've got big red squares at either end. You've got a couple of medium-sized red squares. They are the handlebars which you can click and drag on to make a shape. So I'm just making this one a little bit of a wobbly shape, just mostly because. And that will now follow the curve of that line. That is the transform controls finished with for this effect. So let's just close that up there. When you close it up, you will notice that you do still have your keyframe showing, but because you're not actively editing that part of the timeline, they're just coming up as small grey circles. So, next bit. This is where it starts getting a bit more interesting. That's all the setup done, that's the basic movement done, a basic shape in, and appearing and disappearing of the shape. The next bit, I'm actually going to hide the background layer so it's on black so you can see the difference that this makes. The next bit, we actually add in the majority of the effects, well actually all of the effects. We don't need to work off this medium solid 1 layer that we've got selected down here. We do need to be in the effect controls, and it will have the layer name at the top that this is actually applying the effects to. Now you can go through the effects option and down through here, or you can right click on the effect controls and get to the menu system that way. To start with, we're going to want to distort our shape, and we want to turbulent displace it. So we'll select turbulent displace, and you can see you've got the original line, the original outline is still there, but this shape has actually at the moment twisted. The settings that we're going to change are the amount setting over here and the size setting over here. And to start with, we turn the amount up, we turn the size down, and I'm just clicking and dragging left and right to change the size. So we'll start off with that. That's got quite a good wibbly edge. And that is the last bit of editing of the turbulent displace that we actually do up on here. So I'm going to collapse that so it's not taking up a lot of space, and I'm going to come back down to my layers palette and open the effects layer with the turbulent displace opened there. Now, so that this changes over time, I want to put in the stopwatch for adding some keyframes. I'll do it on the size and on the amount. So that's for 2 keyframes set to start with. I'm then going to move along slightly, and I'm going to maybe put the turbulence up a bit in the amount, just put the size up slightly so it's going a little bit more all over the place. Move this down so I can see where I'm going. And then I'm going to move it along a bit further along the timeline, so we've come up to here, and it's just a case now of setting your keyframes and changing these settings along here to make changes to the shape that you want to see going through. So we'll just speed this up a little bit. So I'm just again clicking and dragging, and then set one just before it goes off the top of the screen. And we're going to want this just to sort of space out a little bit. And then when it gets to this bit, set some keyframes, take the size right down. We'll change the turbulent just so it has a little bit more of an effect going through. And now that will change shape as it goes through there and eventually poof off up the top in a little blast of fire. That's the first effect. That's pretty cool, you know, moves all of the stuff around. I don't need the effects open at the bottom now. That's the only one that we are going to be applying a keyframe to for this, so I can collapse all these menus. Everything else is effects added up the top at the effects controls here. So first thing, wand blast and bits of fire and stuff don't usually have really clear-cut edges. So we want to go to blur and sharpen, and we want to go to fast blur in this. Repeat the edge pixels so that you don't get any sharp cut off edges anywhere, and just increase the size of the blur slowly until you get an effect that you like. So I'm actually going to go there and just check it by scrubbing through and watching it change slightly to make sure that it is the effect that you want. That's the settings for the fast blur done. Next bit, you want to go to the color correction, and this is where it gets a little bit interesting, for a short while anyway. Go to the colorama. Now initially this has gone bright pink. Looks delightful. First setting that we change on the colorama is the invert phase, and we get the phase from the alpha value. Collapse the input phase back now that you've got your nice rainbow coloured blob. Go to the output cycle, and you want to set this one to ramp grey. Now in order to get the full effect, I'm just going to put the background back in. Now you may be thinking, well, we went to all that trouble blurring the darn thing. Why have we now given it a really harsh black background? The answer to that is because if we don't give it this harsh black outline, we can't get effective colouring to change colours and add colours into our effect. So that the black background doesn't show, click on the actual name where it says medium solid 1 and go to blending mode and change it to screen. That gets rid of that black background. Collapse the colorama, right click at the top and go back into color correction. This time go to color balance. This will give you a long list of stuff that you can change. You don't need to expand any of these unless you really want to go and fiddle about with them. But mostly you just clicking and dragging the colors that you want to get the effect that you want. So I'm just going to put a little bit of green in there. I'm going to take any blue that's in there out. And what is actually happening, if I hide the background again, is you can see the colors change in there. So I've got a little bit more of an orange glow on that. Got a very definite red glow going on in here. Might make it a little bit more red actually and take some of that green back out. Let's do some red, a little bit more red in there. Up the green slightly, don't want it too far up, want more of an orangey colour in that bit. And a teeny bit of red in there. Take the blue out, don't need blue in this. Just balance it out with a little bit of green so you get something that looks nice and soft. Then when I put the background back in, what will actually happen is the colour, you'll see the difference in the colour as it goes up. You can go through here, through the effects and into any of these actually and change them the same way as we changed the turbulent displace, same way as we did the masks, same way as we did the transform using the keyframes. I'm actually going to leave it at that for this and just collapse all of that back up. Now what we have, if we just scrub through the timeline, you can see it just disappearing off up there. So I'm just going to set this back to the front now, and I'm going to press the play button. I'm just going to see what this actually looks like. Move it down so I can see where it goes off. Pick up my selection tool again while I'm up there. And press the play button so you see what the effect actually looks like. Blink and you'll miss it. It does go whooshing off quite quickly. Now this is taking a little while to go through this first time. When it goes through the second time, after it's finished working all these frames out and calculating them all, it will play through a lot more smoothly, and obviously it will play very smoothly when it is rendered. Now it is a bit of a blink and you'll miss it moment, but that has something to do with the fact that it is sort of a fire flash going up, and they tend not to hang around particularly. So you've got that. You've gone to File on the File menu up here. You've gone to Save and saved it as a Adobe AfterEffects project when my computer is finished dying a death because I'm asking it to do a load of video editing. Here we go. Save it somewhere you remember it. I'm saving mine in my videos folder on here. Give it a sensible name. Now that's the editable file saved. In order to get the effect out of After Effects, you need to render the file. So we go to File, down to Export, Add to Render Queue. That will give you a new tab where your timeline was before with all your render settings. On the Output to, you need to choose where you want it to go to, and you want to select, well, give it a name that you're going to use. I'm actually just going to save it over this one. Click the Save button. Obviously mine's come up with Replace because I've selected something, and you can see at the bottom it's been output to gobletfire.avi. Once you've got that set up, press the render and it will render. The amount of time it takes to render will depend a lot on the effect that you've added, and also how long your clip is. So if this one is rendering quite quickly, the more intense the effects, the more effects that you've put on, the more layers that there are. So I'm just waiting at the moment for it to change to done when it is finished. So it shouldn't be too many more seconds now. It's just finishing off. Even playing a nice little symphony at the end of the render.